Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome aboard once more for another sunset safari. We're coming to you live from Kenya in Africa, just 1 degree south of the equator, and we're in the Mara Triangle watching giraffe, watching us. You're watching Safari Live, and my name is Ralph Kirsten. On the camera we have Craig. How's it, Craig? Now please don't forget to join us on the hashtag Safari Live on Twitter and on the YouTube live chat. Please send us your questions and your comments and join us on the largest game drive in the world. Now, I just want to remind you that I know that there's a big game happening in the US on the 4th of February. Well, just after that game, Safari Live will be coming to you on that day for a full week of prime time safaris, and that's not the only thing. Very exciting is that we'll be joining with that is Safari Bingo. So please go onto the natgeo.com/Safari Live and find out the rules and regulations, and please join us for that exciting time. Now, let's get back to what's happening here. These giraffe happily watching us, and it is a lovely balming afternoon. It is 31 degrees centigrade with 88 degrees Fahrenheit, so nice and hot. All the clouds have dissipated, and after yesterday afternoon, where it seemed like we were going to have massive thunder showers once more, it didn't really happen, and today it's cleared up quite nicely. So all the animals are obviously feeling the heat a little bit, but these giraffe happily just continuing about their daily chores of feeding on the vegetation, and as they're watching us, every now and then you can see them as they ruminate with the little cud balls coming all the way up their long throat into their mouth, doing a little bit of re-chewing and swallowing it back down. But look at that face, just looking over a little bit of brush, watching us as curious as ever, a giraffe in their totally natural habitat. Wonderful. Look at that. And how are those beautiful eyelashes? That is absolutely fantastic. Just looking over that. Hello, girl. My plan for the afternoon is we're heading out towards the Chitwa airstrip, and then I want to try and catch up with those female lions, the lionesses, that have been a little bit unsuccessful of late with me watching them trying to catch warthogs. Well, I want to go and see if they have either fooled themselves in the time that I haven't been watching, or we might have a very good opportunity to witness them hunting once more. They are going to have to eat sooner or later, so we are going to get lucky on one of these drives, I'm sure. But the warthogs have been definitely keeping the one up on them for now. Now, Julie, thanks for your comment and getting involved and saying that these are beautiful, majestic giraffe. Julie, I agree with you 100%. Look at that. And they're just watching us, watching them. It's we're doing a little bit of backwards and forwards here, but giraffe are often very curious like that. I've often on foot gotten some of the students that I was training to do a little bit of rolling on the ground towards them, and they almost get very confused as to this strange being that's rolling up the road towards them, and they literally come right towards the students and stand over them wondering what is going on. Now, just an update, we've got Steve here who's joined us from Djuma, and he's now out on drive, but we'll see if he's been able to get down the hill. Jamie is also with us, but I know that there was a slight little problem with the vehicle, so we'll see what happens with them and if they're actually able to join us, but I'll keep you posted. And speaking of Steve, it seems like he's been able to get everything going there with the vehicle. So let's head you on over to him and see how he's getting on.
Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to you, myself, and I have got very nice gentleman I met yesterday, Adrian on camera. My name is Steve Folgenbridge, and welcome to Masai Mara, my first time ever up here, and it is wonderful to be up here with all these lovely people I've been talking to on the radio, and they've been seeing my face, but now it's nice to see all of their faces. And I too, Ralph, have a giraffe. And is he being curious? He was looking a little bit curious. And what is incredible about this environment is how far you can see. It's just such a long distance. We've just come down the mountain, and yes, Ralph is correct. I had some car trouble coming out of the gate, or into the gate. The starter motor started playing up, so it wasn't a very good start. Okay, we're just going to fix our camera, and in the meantime we're going to go over to Ralph and see what he's got for you.
Thanks, Steve. Well, I don't know what's going on there, everybody, but I'm sure they're going to work very hard to get everything fixed up and good to go. Unlucky for Steve, that's a little bit of a slow start, but I'm sure he'll be back in business shortly. Now, speaking of collective nouns, I know that we can call giraffe a tower of giraffe. And I know when they all start moving in the same direction, we'd then like to call them a journey. Well, if there are any others that you have that are nice and descriptive, well, send them through. We'd love to hear your comments about the giraffe in this kind of situation. Remember that their social structure is quite loosely arranged, and we call it loose associations, because giraffe don't generally move in herds. They will come together and split apart as they deem fit, but they don't generally stay in a herd of any kind. It's just I think they probably, as we were saying yesterday, probably more fitting to the reggae-type listeners, them and the buffalo, and I'm sure that they would be very relaxed in a reggae party. Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, Burning Spear. I think definite giraffe music. I don't know, that's what I think anyway. But very beautiful animals all the same. And look at those ears, very intently listening out to my commentary as we talking about them. I wonder what they're thinking. It's always quite strange when you're sitting watching animals like this and they just staring straight back at you. Now, it seems that Steve has fixed his problems with his camera and his vehicle, so let's head you on over to him while I go down towards the Chitwa airstrip.
Thank you very much, Ralph. And from Ralph's journey to our journey, it is a journey of faults and starts, and the starter motor failing and then a bit of a camera issue. What else can go wrong? Hopefully it's all out the way now, and all we're going to have for you is a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. I am super excited to be out here in the Masai Mara for my first time. I was out with Jamie this morning, sitting on the back. It was nice to have a little bit more of an elevated view because the grass here is quite long, and to find animals is not as easy as it should be, but I thought it was quite easy compared to what we have to go through down in the south. Here you just kind of look and you see, first of all, the giraffe and all the animals are looking at something, and then lo and behold, there is your cat lying in the grass. And we were sitting just up here earlier watching the hammerkorps when a leopard just jumped out of the bushes, and that for me was just really special. First 20 minutes or so in the Mara out on drive, and we got a leopard after lions were chasing, or were being chased by buffalo. It's just, it really opens up the gate for some interesting sightings. Daniel, what are my first impressions of the Mara? Good afternoon. So far it is just so much different, so extremely different from what I expected. I expected open spaces, but it's hard to put your finger on open spaces until you actually experience open spaces. It's vast, it's large, there are still trees, but only sort of in the drainage lines or in sort of rocky areas. So I'm sure when fires hit here, it is just phenomenal. My objective for the day though is to hopefully not get lost. Is this the way? Next one, eh? Okay. This is my first day, folks, so I've got Adrian in the back. We're not going to get lost. The objective of today is to not get lost and not get stuck. That is the first thing, and whatever we find along the way is just going to be bonus. But from what we saw this morning, I think we're going to have quite a good afternoon, because this place is just magical. It is 31 degrees Celsius. It's about 85 Fahrenheit at the moment. It's a very different sort of environment to where I've come from, where you're absolutely melting at this time of day already. Even though it's 31, it's not very, very hot. We're down in Djuma, 2 fans and a swimming pool and a shower, just to kind of keep your head above water with regards to the temperature. This is very mild and very pleasant. And I'm sure it bodes well for predators moving around. As we've seen in the past few weeks, the animals are moving. But hopefully we don't get a big thunderstorm today, Adrian. Hopefully. And thank you very much, everybody welcoming me. I had some amazing birding this morning. I downloaded a new bird app for East Africa, and it is just phenomenal how many more birds there are here. So for me, that is going to be insane for the next few weeks. I already got about 40 birds this morning, and a lot of them I weren't able to identify. So it's about 40 that I could ID, and the other 200 or so I could not ID. I just have to also be aware that there is traffic on this road. I'm not used to having anyone drive up behind me. So this is the Masai Mara. It is open reserve, and there are lots of people in and around, and I am blessed. I've been sent up here to work. This is my office for the next few weeks, ladies and gentlemen. Really, really tough. Really, really difficult. I arrived with tears. Okay, and while we continue on our journey, we're going to go back to Ralph, who has an update for you, but we'll see you back shortly.
Thanks, Steve. And well, everybody, it's very exciting to have Steve on board here in the Masai Mara. And I actually studied with Steve in 1999 in Pretoria. We studied nature conservation together. So it was quite weird to see him in Djuma. And it's funny how things work, eh? When I mean, what is that? It's over 10 years ago. It's about 10 years, just under, that I haven't seen him. And then yeah, he arrived at Djuma and told me that he's decided to come and have a look at things on this side. So very nice to have him here, and we'll do our best to make him feel at home. But making things feel at home, look at this. Lots of buffalo all next to the road. I don't want to disturb them too much by going down the road. Look at these ones on the right hand side of the road here. They're all lying in the mud, everybody fighting over a little piece of it there, and lots of oxpeckers on them as well. So this is where you would expect to find the buffalo on a nice hot afternoon such as today, all just trying to cool off a little bit in the mud, and they're caking themselves with it. But the oxpeckers are still also all around. We can hear them doing their jit, jit. There they are. There's probably both the yellow-billed and the red-billed. But on buffalo, we do generally find a little bit more of the yellow-billed oxpeckers. They're more specialists on the buffalo per se, and there's very different techniques between the two. The red-billed doing more of a combing action, whereas the yellow-billed doing more of a picking at particular parasites. But very interesting to watch them as they move about. But as I discussed with Jamie, there is a lot of research actually showing that the oxpeckers don't make too much of a dent on the parasites. Obviously, they do take some off, but any kind of parasite like that would, well, the oxpeckers wouldn't finish off all their food that's available, so they do allow the parasites, obviously, to be able to be enough for them to keep food going for the oxpeckers themselves. But that's wonderful to see. And you can see now also the birds, which are feeling the heat, keeping their mouths open there, just thermoregulating as well. Obviously, they're not sweating like we would. They're quite similar size to that of a bison, or if you had to see a very big cow. That's pretty much the size of a buffalo, although remember that buffalo are wild, so they're like a very big bull cow that's got a serious attitude. So like those bulls that run through Spain, where everybody tries to get out of their way, well, I think if you had to put buffalo in the same kind of situation, there'd be a lot of carnage. I think people would be a lot more scared of these individuals than those bulls, but they do still do quite a bit of damage to people, and well, that's pretty much the size of them. But on a day like this, they do generally lie up in the mud, everybody trying to get a little bit of the cool feeling and relaxing like they do, and doing a bit of ruminating at the same time. Remember, that's one of the cons of being a ruminant. You do need to spend a lot of time relaxing and chewing the cud, as that one is doing there. Lots of chewing to be done, regurgitating, chewing, swallowing, regurgitating, chewing, swallowing. They're going on this endless cycle, as opposed to animals like elephants, zebra, warthog, who need to just about constantly feed, and they're passing it straight through with a very different kind of digestion. Well, the ruminants a little bit more effective, but still need to spend lots of time doing this. Now, Joy in Hong Kong, you're saying that one of these birds has a dark bill. Why? Well, Joy, that's it's one of the immature or juvenile individuals, and I did see it as well. Yes, so it hasn't quite got its adult coloration, and it would just be one of the youngsters that has not quite developed into its full colors. That's all, and so, but there you can see them with their lovely colors on their bills. And they are a very good indicator for us when we're walking through the bush. We listen out for them, and they're normally the easiest way to pick up that there's buffalo nearby, especially if you're walking in areas like in Djuma, where it's quite thick brush. You've got to listen out for the oxpeckers, because they're ever present on the buffalo, and the easiest way to pick up that there's some buffalo around. Now look at all of them with their mouths open, standing in the full sun, and they obviously... Oh, is that the one? No, that's not the one with the dark bill, is it? Maybe that one on the right there. He's really looking for the parasites, isn't he? He's having a close inspection on that buffalo. Oh, there's a little bit of a domestic going on. Getting a bit close to the prime mud spot. So a little bit of dominance probably being displayed there. So, I think we're going to slowly make our way down towards the swampy area, because these buffalo are quite happy in the mud. But while we do that, let's head you on over to Steve with one of those animals that love being around the water as well.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Ralph. And I did see one of these this morning. It is a waterbuck, but very different in its design to the ones we find down south. Well, should I say, to their bottom. That's the only real difference. I'm trying to have a little look in the book and see what the real difference is between them. Other than that, there seems to be no actual difference, just in sort of where they find, geographical area. And yes, he is ankle deep, as you would say it, in very, very moggy, boggy, wet soil. You can see the water around him. We had elephants this morning walking through this, and it was very slushy and very wet, and the waterbuck actually loves this kind of habitat. As the name waterbuck implies, they are very bulky in their feeding, and they feed on lots of luscious and moist vegetation that you would find growing in this little swamp-like area. Quite nice to see. This lone bull on his own, he's quite big. He's about as big as they get, but his ears are moving, always listening. Now don't know if you can hear it online there, folks, but as he lifts his feet, there's this sound. If you've ever been stuck in the mud, that's the kind of sound we make. You can hear him feeding. Sloshy thinness of the feeding and the movement of the feet. Something moved. It's important when they're on their own to keep a watchful eye out. It's why we often see your herd animals in groups. Allows them to feed more. Someone's always looking. When you're on your own like this, it's quite tricky. But when you're in an open clearing like this, it's not easy for something to sneak up on you. But he still has to be careful. Very intently looking behind us. I don't see anything though. Not much wind to speak of. Not much wind to speak of. Wendy asks if waterbuck can interbreed, and I'm pretty sure if you took this one with the waterbuck from down south, they would be able to breed. I mean, there's no difference in the book. I mean, in the book, they basically there's two groups. They recognise the Defassa and the other one. There's no real difference in them, so I wouldn't say there's any real genetic difference. So I would say you could probably interbreed them, but they just don't occur in the same area. Then maybe someone out there who knows more about breeding animals would know, but yeah, we just don't find them together. But apart from that white change on the bum, there's no difference between them. There must be some genetics in there, but I reckon you could probably come up with a half-ringed waterbuck bum. I don't know, half shaded in. You haven't seen a southern one, have you, Adrian?
No.
No, he hasn't. And Julie wants to know if waterbuck are solitary. No, Julie, they're not. They're normally quite gregarious. You find them in pretty large groups, but when you get a dominant bull, territorial bull, he can often be found on his own, but he will also allow younger males into that territory, and he'll kind of give them favors in a way, and hopefully that when others come in the area, he can sort of get the assistance of the other younger ones to help him defend that territory. And then the territory is designed to attract females, and with the females in that territory, he'll mate with them. But no, I wouldn't say that. You just often find bulls like this on their own. He just maybe doesn't have the ladies for that period, or the ladies are in someone else's territory at that time. But a big waterbuck male, often you find them with females, and yeah, definitely gregarious. Can be into groups of up to 30. And the bulls will have their territories, and you'll often find little nursery groups with the females, with a couple of babies. I've often been on a walk where 2 or 3 young waterbuck have been on their own, and then slowly after a period of time their mother comes back, and that's just a way of keeping them away from the predators. But we're going to move on from here, and I believe Ralph has got another bulk grazer with him on that side. Let's go over to you, Ralph.
Thanks, Steve. And yes, everybody, I actually decided not to go anywhere because this is actually such an awesome sighting with all these buffalo, and there's so much going on with these oxpeckers and the egrets, and there's youngsters, in buffalo terms I mean, but there's also juvenile oxpeckers as well. And so I just decided to hang around a bit and see what happens. There's been quite a bit of vocalizing going on between them as well. Now, Stuart, you want to know what would be the warning signs of a buffalo charging? Normally, Stuart, the first thing that they do is they raise their head, and it's also obviously sniffing the air, but when they're very interested in you, and normally when you're on foot, but they even do it to us when we're on the vehicle as well. They raise their head like this, and they almost look down over their nose at you, and they lift their nostrils, and that's obviously really getting their nose into the air. But then they can stomp their feet a little bit and scratch the ground, and then there can be snorts that go on, but stomping the ground with the head raised and snorts, that's when you need to be a little bit wary of them, because that can mean that there is an imminent charge on the way. So if you are sort of faced with that with buffalo, it's a good idea to start backing up a bit and identify the closest tree. because if they do come, well, you don't want to be left on the ground. If there's a whole herd of buffalo like this charging towards you, everybody up the closest tree, and I tell you, I've had a few times where you wouldn't think you could get up those specific trees that we have, and normally very easy to get up when you've got adrenaline pumping through you. And I've had up to 10 people up a rather small tree and just out of the reach of the buffalo. But so very easy to get up the tree, but then getting down is always normally a little bit more difficult than getting in it. So I think from here now, definitely we're going to move on a little bit and go down towards the swampy area. While we do that, let's head you on over to Steve with one of our feathered friends.
Yes, indeed, we are back with a feathered friend, and we were talking about how swampy this water is. And we have a fishing bird, also catching insects, but fish at the same time. This is one of our smallest fishes, and I wonder if any of you out there can tell me what it is. I have left my phone in the other vehicle that broke down, so I'm not sure if there's any other strange and beautiful looking kingfisher like this up here. I have a feeling it's one I know from down in the south. And I'm wondering if any of you avid birders watching can quickly comment and tell me what you think it is. Yes, thanks Taylor. I was correct in my assumption, and I'm wondering if any of you folks down south are able to tell me quickly what this is. And if you get it right, I want to know, how do you know that? Oh, he's gone. Beautiful, beautiful bird. It was a small little kingfisher. Which one was it? I'm going to wait for your answers, folks. In the meantime, we're going to continue. But just on that note, see how boggy it is here? That was actually catching aquatic insects who sought make a little kill. I don't know if there's any fish in there at the moment. There'll certainly be small frogs, and it definitely caught some form of an insect that just before you came to us, it was smashing against the little reed. Not that the reed was too much of an anvil, and then it swallowed. But thank you, that was beautiful. The colours, such a colourful little bird. So what I love about this is I've come all the way up to the Masai Mara, and they've given me the car keys today and said go and explore. Hey, it's terrible. Don't know how I'm going to manage. They had to hold me. They had to force me out this afternoon. Oh, gaming. I just arrived today. You're asking me how big is the Mara. I'm going to have to defer that question. I was told 2 days ago to come here, and then I spent the whole of yesterday coming here, and now I'm on game drive. So I'm sorry I haven't done the research to figure out how big the Mara is, but I'm pretty sure someone else who's listening has got the answer. How about someone in FC or someone back home? How big is the Masai Mara? I know it is phenomenally big, but I don't have the maths with me right now. I'm terribly sorry. I know that we only have the traversing area for a very small portion of that, and that is huge in its own. Keeping our eyes peeled though. This long grass, you never know what can be hiding, lurking. So I don't see the clouds that I saw yesterday. Emma would like to know, how am I going to cope with not being able to get out of the car and track? That is probably the hardest part, Emma, about coming up here, is I've been told we're not allowed to go walking. So that is a pity. That is a pity, but I'm just going to have to work on my driving skills and my presentation within the car. And as James likes to tell me, I'm going to have to work on this muscle stretch, this turning of the muscle in the backwards, which he has achieved very good success in. And I suppose it'll give me the opportunity now while I'm up here to do a lot more of that. But I'm going to have to balance it with lefts and rights so that I get a nice balance in my back stretches. Alternatively, I have to just do lots of yoga back at camp. But yes, I know the tracking and the walking is an element of the bush that I absolutely enjoy. But being given the opportunity to come up to the Masai Mara and do this is not one I would ever turn down. So we will survive. We will survive. I went for months without walking, so I'll just have to catch up on it when I get back. I can do some walking around camp. Okay. The Mara Triangle is 500 square kilometers, and it's a third of the size of Masai Mara, the Mara Triangle. So to answer your question there, I think it was David. It is big. It is very big. And it's kind of open as well. It's not like that's it and it's ended. It then extends into the Mara, and then it extends into Tanzania, and it just keeps going and going. It is a phenomenal area, and yeah, I will be doing more reading up on that. I only got my little map this afternoon, so I apologize for not being in the know. It's one of the worst things being a guide, not knowing, but the worst thing being a guide is lying and making up some story. It's always better to defer, but I know for a fact I'll know next time somebody asks me that question. Tom would like to know what animal in the Mara I'm really looking forward to seeing. I saw some topi this morning. It was quite nice to see. I saw my first Thompson's gazelle. I was looking forward to seeing them, but what I was really looking forward to is just to see that. It's just endless, endless, endless. And what I know that is within there is, oh, I mean, look what we didn't even see. They were right in front of us. We didn't even see these buffalo. So what I'm interested, Tom, is not necessarily in what animal, but it's the number and the interaction. Because I know, being in Djuma and in the Kruger, in the savannas there, I'm just going to position here for Adrian, because we've got some very sleepy buffalo. How's that? What I do know is that in Djuma we really struggle to get these long open pan shots of lions and leopards and whatever hunting, and out here that seems to be the cameraman's dream. So that's something I've always been wanting to come and see. And here we have got some buffalo doing what they do best. They're in a very muddy pond, keeping nice and cool. Quite envious. They're doing it for free. I know some of you folks back home pay huge amounts of money to go to mud wallows. Ragu asks, can you get domesticated buffalo? The buffalo is always going to be wild, but they have been breeding them down in the Eastern Cape in South Africa and other places in the country. In South Africa, I don't know if they're doing it elsewhere in the continent, but some people think that those buffalo are tame. They get fed by a vehicle, or they get very used to people. But I've known of people that have these potentially tame buffalo that have nearly been killed by them. I don't think you could ever tame it. I think you could take a lot of the wild out of it, but it is still a very dangerous animal. And when you weigh up to close to 2,000 pounds, you know, you've got to wonder if that thing decides it's having a bad day, it could pin you up against the wall and it'll be the end of you. So many people get injured by these buffalo every year, and these are not even the wild ones, the potentially tamed, diseased-free ones that they're breeding for a lot of the game industry. So I don't know if that's tame. Is a bull, a male, a cow ever tame? I don't think so. Ferdinand the Bull from the cartoons was not your not the representative. Alex, you're asking me a question about buffalo meat and what it tastes like. I am a vegetarian, Alex, but I have eaten buffalo back in the day, and the thing with buffalo meat is it's very tough. So there's two ways of eating it. Either you quickly pan fry it like a carpaccio, or not a carpaccio, like a very thin fillet, and you eat it, but then you run the risk of contracting TB, or you boil it in a stew in a cast iron pot for half of the day, and then it gets very, very tender and very, very nice to eat. And how would I describe it? It's a mixture between cattle and sheep. It's very hard to explain the flavor, but it's definitely edible. and the lions do enjoy eating it. But if you don't cook it overly, or you undercook it, should I say, it is very, very tough. Very, very tough. So we talk about free-range beef or free-range meat. This is as free-range as it gets. And buffaloes living out here, they are quite tough and sinewy. So from a taste point of view, it's definitely something people should try if they're into meat, but that needs to be sustained sustainably, and there's all sorts of practices for that. These are some lovely buffalo bulls. He's getting up. He's in the, look at all the flies. Can you believe it? I was just sitting at one of the airports yesterday. I was getting bitten by flies. So the mud apparently keeps them covered and cool and also helps with the flies, but we don't have any mud on us, and the buffaloes seem to be enjoying themselves. But we are going to move on from these Dugger boys, as the name implies, and we're going to back to Mr. Ralph for another update.
Thanks, Steve. And yes, well, just continuing on from what Steve was saying about buffalo meat, I haven't had pure, just straight meat from buffalo, but I have had biltong. Now, if anybody wants to know what biltong is, I think the closest to it in America would be jerky, but we actually get a little bit uppity when people call our biltong jerky. Now, biltong was sort of invented around the time of the Boer Wars, when the Afrikaner people were fighting with the British, and it was one of their ways of preserving meat so that they could have very good meat protein, and it was one of the reasons why they were able to actually deliver the guerrilla warfare that they did, the Afrikaners in fact, against the British, and that was one of the ways that they were able to survive for very long periods out in the bush. So what they were doing is they were taking meat and they were soaking it in a vinegar, normally red wine vinegar, and then just spicing it with salt and pepper. Now, in today's times, it's become quite a delicacy in South Africa. So what they do is they soak it overnight in red wine vinegar. They use garlic cloves, they use coriander and nutmeg. They also put in a little bit of Worcester sauce and a couple of other spices that they then soak that overnight, and then they hang it for up to 2 weeks. It depends on how dry it is and so on. You can also do it with a little bit of a fan, and that speeds up the process. But anyway, what you'll end up is with a very dry meat. It depends on how you like it. Some of the guys like it quite red inside with just that bit of a crust on the outside. Very, very nice, whichever way you like it. And they do it with most of the meat that you can get in the wild, with impala, springbok, wildebeest, zebra, all sorts. But I've had buffalo biltong, which was very nice indeed. And so I wouldn't know what it's like in terms of just a steak or whatever like that. But yeah, obviously we don't want to be just looking at animals thinking about what they taste like, but the biltong that I had of buffalo was very nice indeed, and it wasn't tough at all. But as I say, it's normally the best cuts that they use, the silver side that they make biltong out of. But sorry for all you vegetarians out there, I don't want to put you off, but very tasty indeed, and very much a delicacy in South Africa. And because of our elaborate ways of making it and so on, people do get slightly insulted if you call it jerky, because I think there's a little bit of a simpler process that goes on with that, and most people that have tasted jerky, which I have as well, would say that it does taste a little bit like eating the sole of a shoe, which some people also say that a lot of biltong tastes like, but it depends who's made it, what spices they've used, how they've dried it, and what kind of animal they've used to make it with as well. Now, speaking of eating buffalo, I do want to find an animal that eats them. Now, Tiny Meadows, you're saying thanks for that story, very interesting. Yes, well, if you ever get a chance to come to South Africa and you are a carnivore or a meat eater, well, I do suggest that you taste the different kinds of biltong that we have. It is absolutely fascinating. Sometimes you go to these meat markets or butcheries that make all these different kinds of biltong, and you can have your choice of springbok or impala or kudu. Kudu is one of my favorite. And I like to support these kind of meat varieties because in terms of conservation, it's a monetary kickback to people that are supporting wildlife areas or wilderness areas as opposed to cattle, livestock. I would much rather buy kudu or zebra meat, because the more money the people are getting for that kind of meat, the more they will make wilderness areas available. And that's one of the things that we do need to remember, that we'd rather actually go away from beef and mutton and goat, whatever it is, and rather support the wild meat, because those people will then get the money they need to make bigger areas available for those animals to roam free. And not only that, the other thing about it is, ethically wise, for me, much better to buy wild meat, because that animal is born free, it dies free, as opposed to the cattle and livestock that are piled up and lined up onto a truck, taken off to an abattoir and slaughtered. And for me, terrible situation going on with that, because if anybody has ever been to an abattoir and watched actually what goes on there, it's a very sorry state of affairs, because yeah, it's very cruel, I believe, to all of those animals involved. But the wild meat is shot in the wild, and as I say, born free, died free, and the money that goes in there then makes more wilderness areas available to not only those animals but everything else that goes along with it. So my favorite biltong being that of springbok and kudu. I'm going to send you on over to Steve, who's watching one of the great aquatic birds, but I'd also like to know which biltong he likes best.
Ralph. I'm not sure if Ralph's aware that I'm a vegetarian, but biltong is definitely something I'm more prone to eating than other meat. It's more of an ethical thing for me, and I know that game meat is, the animals are, they live a life, you know, they have a life, they spend it doing what they do, and then next thing they are biltong. So I'm a little bit more in favor of that than I am in the beef industry, but I'm not going to get into that now. And if I had to choose biltong, then Ralph, seeing as you put him on the spot, I would choose kudu, because kudu is a very tender, juicy meat. And Ralph's dead right about the biltong industry and venison and how it is supportive of the wildlife industry, and it's very, very big in Namibia. In Namibia you can get hundreds of different flavors and types of biltong. But I was going to ask Ralph back, because I think that biltong was actually founded when they started the Great Trek, when the first Boers moved up from the Cape up towards the Johannesburg area, moving away from the British. It was interesting because they used to move. Oh, just by the way, we have got a Hammerkorp on the screen, folks, but Ralph has got the meat discussion going. I just want to clarify, maybe he's read that the biltong was founded in the Boer War, but that was long after. I think it was actually a staple of the Boers. The people coming up from the Cape, moving away from British rule, they would move through herds of springbok. And now this is a fact from a journal of the Voortrekkers from a very long time ago, a journal where they basically for 5 days they would set up camp and move, set up camp, move, set up camp, moving north. For 5 whole days the springbok herd did not stop moving past them. Can you imagine the amount of animals that must be? And that is what it used to be like, and that's probably why the South African team is called the Springboks, the rugby. And those people used to shoot 100 or so or whatever a day and then make it into biltong. They'd only shoot at one point, then they'd stay for a while, they'd dry them and cure them and salt them, and then they'd have meat for the next few weeks of their journey. So that's where the onset of biltong started, and I'm sure that it obviously proliferated and was very popular during the Boer War. So I wonder if Ralph knows that story. But here we have the hammerkop, who is not a meat eater, although he might eat the odd frog and some fish. I don't think he's ever tried buffalo biltong. But he's walking around. We've still got the very marshy area to our left-hand side. He's walking around in there, parts of the heron and egret family, just plodding along in the mud there, picking up whatever it comes across, tadpoles, frogs, all sorts of little insects. It's very, very busy. Doesn't look like it's building any nest of sorts. It's on the forage, and it is feeding. And it's a very, very cool bird. I do like hammerkops. We do see quite a lot of them in South Africa, but here we've been able to follow him for the longest time because it is so wide and open here. Marvelous. Well, we're going to continue on. I think we're probably going to get to the river at some point. I saw it from the air yesterday, and it looks like an absolutely wonderful thing to go dip a little toe in. Maybe not, but if it looked like an enticing thing to dip your toe, thousands of wildebeest do it every year. Can't be so bad. There we have giraffe and waterbuck aplenty. This place is magical. Magical. Dawn, you want to know the ins and outs of what is the difference between the Mara camp and the Djuma camp. Well, first of all, the Mara camp is on a mountain. It's very spaced out. We're all living in tents. We share ablutions like we do in Djuma, but we live in tents with no walls, and we're not too close to each other. The tents are spaced a meter or two apart. The view is better than what you see in front of you, if you could believe that, so that is magical. But other than that, the setup itself is very similar. A Djuma is very small in the camp layout. You've got rows of rooms next to each other with sort of like a communal dining area in the middle, whereas here there's a communal dining area at the back in a big tent that I haven't even used yet. I don't think anyone has used it since I've been here, but I've only been here for one meal, so we will see. We'll see. There seems to be much more space and openness to it. Breeding herd of buffalo in the distance there. Not ideal, but we have a quick look. You see how tall the grass is, folks. I mean, you just see the heads of the buffalo there moving through, so if there was a cheetah walking through that long grass, you wouldn't see it. Or a lion. I don't even know if you can see it, can you? Steve, got the same name as me. Very uncommon name, that one, Steve. Very uncommon. Do buffaloes have partners? No, Steve, they do not. They are gregarious animals. They have got, and it's something for you to bear in mind, and I know James was talking about it the other day. If you look at an animal's genitals, yes, genitals, if they've got a big pair of genitals, they are generally not monogamous. They generally have more than one female, and in the form of buffaloes, they have got enormous genitals, hence the fact that they occur in really big breeding herds, and it is actually dominated by a group of females. Breeding herd of buffalo, you have the females, the alpha females you could call them. They move through the field with their youngsters behind them, and all the old and sort of lower ranking females follow up behind, and so they get poor grazing, and then the males kind of intertwined in amongst that, some in the front, some on the sides, but constantly jostling for mating with the females. As any female urinates, a male walks up and he tests the urine, and another male tests the urine, and then if she's breeding ready, they will fight and they'll push each other, jostle each other. It's just like testosterone overload in a breeding herd, because any female, and there can be over 200 of them necessarily in a breeding herd, and everyone who urinates, every male is sniffing that urine and is wondering, is she ready, and then jostling with all of his friends, so to speak. So there's a lot of pressure on the males in that herd, and over a period of time they lose condition, and then a group of males that's been quietly on the side, feeding on their own, not jostling, because there's no female urine anywhere, so they haven't been assessing whether there's any breeding readiness, and then they move in better condition, displace those males, and so it's a constant upheaval of that. And then after a period of time when just the busyness of that, the testosterone gets too much and they get a bit old and tired, you start getting groups like what we saw before of Duggar boys, and it eventually leads to what we have just over here on the left, Adrian. If you can get that buffalo bull over there for me, please. Then it eventually leads to these guys who are on their own, and they're old and they're tired and they're often very, very grumpy. Now, these are the dangerous ones. A breeding herd of buffalo, I've had lots of experience walking with them. They're not that dangerous. They seem quite intimidating, but they generally run from you because of one of them moving. One will move and the rest will move. Whereas this guy, he doesn't know you're there until you know he's there, which is often too late. And many times in the past, I've been walking through some thick vegetation and one of these lonely guys has stood up and he looks at you as if you owe him all the money in the world, and he doesn't move, he just looks at you. And those are the dangerous buffalo. These are the buffalo that slowly but surely have been picked off by lions, and eventually maybe there's one or two of them left. They're grumpy, they're a bit injured, they're old, and if you look at them, sometimes they're covered in their own feces, and they tend to have what seems like irritable bowel syndrome, and they basically just poo all over themselves. So they're very grumpy and old, and they should probably be wearing a nappy and in an old age home, but they are not there yet, and bumping into them on foot can always be quite fun. And to go back to Ralph's question of buffalo biltong, you probably wouldn't want an old Duggar boy as a buffalo biltong, just saying. But that is my story on buffalo, if they have girlfriends and boyfriends, and I'm sure you will remember that. It's quite a nice thing to think about. Not about animals' genitals, I mean, but there's things that you can categorize by looking at animals, and that's generally what gives you the clue on what's going on. See, so we were talking about the waterbuck earlier, and if he's on his own, very difficult for him to see, That's why they're in big groups. That's why you get very close to this guy, and when he stands up, he's very, very close, and he's in sort of that critical stage when any reaction he has to do could be quite a bad one. So you don't want to be in that situation. Ragu, very nice question. What's the lifespan of a buffalo in the wild? A male is probably about 10, 11 years. I'd say 12 is probably a max for the bulls, but females can get up to 15, 16, because they kind of like just hold on to the herd and they follow the herd wherever they go, and the herd kind of keeps them safe. Buffalo bulls, I'd say 12 is about the maximum that they get to, but sort of around 8 or 9 is when they're really at their peak of being a buffalo bull male in the herd. Maybe 7 to 9, and then after that it just gets too much. There's too much of this all the time, too much testosterone, big animals pushing you around all the time, and they move off. And those groups of bulls that come in and go out are often quite closely sort of related friendship wise. They've known each other for 7, 8, 9 years, 10 years, and so when they go off as a group of Duggar boys, then it's generally them that you find together. They've gotten used to their own smell and their own company. Just take it all in. It actually smells different up here, folks. We're at a much different altitude. But while I take in the sights, the smells and the sounds, we're going to go back to Ralph and see if he has an update for you.
Thanks, Steve, and I think Steve is absolutely spot on with biltong being invented a little bit more closer to the Great Trek, or the Groot Trek as it was called with the Afrikaans, people all moving up into the inland all the way up into southern Africa. I think that was probably the time that it was invented, but the Boer Wars, especially the first one, was a real embarrassment to the British Empire, and that was what I was actually meaning, was that was one of the real reasons why the Boers or the Afrikaans people were able to survive in their little bush camps and be able to use the guerrilla warfare against the British soldiers. Now, they really embarrassed the British armies in that first war, and with the second war, we're just doing a little bit of history here while we're skirting along the forest looking for the lions. So the Boers pretty much annihilated them in that first Boer War, and it was as a result of the British underestimating the Boers, firstly. Secondly, not really understanding the terrain and coming out in their full red and black regalia and walking out in their troops out in the open, and the Boer squadrons or guerrilla teams were able to just pick them off. But eventually they went back, and I think it was Lord Kitchener, one of those names. They were so embarrassed that they got together, they decided on their tactics, they sent their troops back, and then they implemented the scorched earth policy, which was basically to take all the women and children, family of the men soldiers of the Boers, and put them into concentration camps, and then burn all their farming fields and basically all of their supplies. So that was where the Boer soldiers then eventually ran out of supplies. They weren't getting stocked up by their families, and so they eventually surrendered. But very interesting indeed that at a similar time, I think, to the Great Trek and that Boer War sort of time, that was also the time when Omar rusks were invented, and Omar literally meaning grandmother. She made these very hard biscuits that we also enjoy in South Africa, and South Africans all over the world will know what I mean when I talk about Omar rusks. But foreigners that come through, we often give that to them for breakfast, and they're very hard. You can hit them on the table and they seem like a bit of a brick, but people don't understand that you're not supposed to eat them just like that. They're literally for dunking in your tea or your coffee, and then they go very soft, and you can really eat it almost like a porridge eventually. So great little tidbits of South African culture. Biltong and Omar rusks, two of the most favorite things of all South Africans, well, mostly, unless you're vegetarian and you don't like biscuits. Now, David, you want to know if animals, and I'm assuming wild animals, have been used in African wars. David, not as far as I know. I know that there was a time in Rhodesia, well, present-day Zimbabwe, when I think it was down to rinderpest, that they all the horses were pretty much wiped out in Rhodesia. Also very much a British sort of influence there, and when all the horses were wiped out, they tried to corral zebra and train them in a similar way that you do horses, but they found it almost impossible. Zebras have been tamed slightly, as we just go down this little embankment here. Zebras have been trained in a little bit of ways. They've been trained in India and in different places to pull sort of like horse carriages or donkey cart. So 2 or 3 of them pulling a cart like that worked reasonably well, but in terms of riding a zebra, never worked, and they couldn't get more than 2 or 3 of them to work together at all. And they spent a lot of time and effort into it. I think it was about 5 years that they tried to train zebra, but it was never successful. So that's one of the only instances that I know of wildlife being attempted to be used during war times. I know that the African elephant has never been able to be properly trained as as opposed to the Indian elephants, but they spent a lot of time in India over the centuries to train those elephants in terms of working for them and carrying loads or doing lumber work, cutting down trees and carrying those trees, etc. But the African elephant has never been put through that evolutionary sort of training. And so the African elephant has always been very wild. There has been some elephant-back safaris, but luckily also it has now been stopped because of the very inhumane way that you do need to train them. You need to break their spirit, and we have spoken about this before, but you need to break their spirit, because at any stage that elephant, if it loses its cool, it would be killing people. So that's quite a difficult situation for an elephant to be in, that it needs to be completely submitted to its master. But I'm very glad that they've stopped all licensing of elephant-back safaris, and there won't be any new elephants trained for such activities, which is a great thing to hear. However, I know that there were some viewers that said the animals like ostriches, which are used a little bit for racing, and people can do ostrich back riding in the Kruger area of South Africa. Some viewers said that that has been stopped because it's inhumane. I believe it hasn't been stopped. It has just been downgraded, that people that are over sort of 50 kilograms are not allowed to ride on the ostriches. But I think it's a little bit different to that of the elephants. But speaking of ostriches and birds, let's head on over to Steve while I find my way out of here, and he's got one of those birds to show you.
Yes, thank you, Ralph. A very aquatic bird, and I thought initially it was a grey heron. But now looking closely at it, it doesn't look like a grey heron. It's got a yellow eye, and it's got that grey all the way down the back. It's almost got a bluish sort of purple tinge to it. But I'm really sorry I don't have my bird app with me today to double check what heron this might be. There are two grey herons in the area as well, and they look completely different. Look at the motion, look at the head, snake-like motion as it goes for something. It missed. You see that grasshopper just took off. Very silent hunter. Herons. Look at that sharp, sharp beak. Very good focus with those eyes. Oh, thank you, Taylor. Black-headed heron. I didn't think it was a black-headed, because there's no black on it at all. It's all actually sort of a bluish purple color. But I think she might be right. I think it might just be the light that we have here. But it's wonderful to see, because one of the characteristic differences you find with the grey heron and the black-headed is the black-headeds you often never find near water. They are very, very sort of away from water, and right here we are next to the water. So characteristic feature that I've always used in the past, allows us to discern the difference. There's the water, and just on the other side of the water is the grey heron. It's just sitting there doing his thing. I'm sure Adrian will get him for you now. There's the grey heron. Very different in their appeal. More of a yellowish beak. Nice comparison. You see his beak's a little bit open. Typical gullah fluttering. You can even see his mouth, his throat is panting there. Try to sort of suck the air over the tongue. Help them cool down. There's not a lot of air movement at the moment. It's actually just picked up slightly since we stopped here. And it's not very hot here. I mean, these birds probably aren't familiar with Djuma, where I've just come from, but this is very pleasant temperatures outside. But when you're used to what you're used to. Mohammed loves herons. Yes, I do too. They are very, very graceful looking birds. Very pretty birds, and there are so many of them around, all different forms and shapes of them, and I'm just loving the ability now, being up here in Kenya, to see what new bird species I can find. And can we go back to that other one, please, Adrian? He's busy there in the long grass doing some hunting. Very, very sort of direct approach. Very slow movement, typical motion. Look how it looks with its eye. and they know exactly how far their beak is from the end of their face, and it makes it very easy for them to stab that face down, or that beak down, onto whatever they're looking to catch, be it in water, be it on the ground. It makes for very accurate sort of stabbing, and it takes us a lot of practice to stick something sharp like that in our nose and be able to spear something like an apple or whatever it might be. But it takes a lot of practice. And you see he's eyeing it with the side of the head. Beautiful. That would make a really nice screen shot. Donna asks if black-headed herons are related to egrets. Egrets are in the heron family, so all the egrets and the herons are in the same family. I can't think of it off the top of my head now, but hummerkorps are in that family as well. So it's quite a broad sort of spectrum. They're not the same as storks, but they all behave in certain similar ways. But it's easy to identify herons from storks in flight. The herons tend to tuck their neck back in that sort of S shape, whereas storks keep their necks outstretched. Why they do that, I don't know, but it makes it much easier for us to identify them in flight, because they can be quite tricky to identify, especially the smaller ones. Well, this is lovely down here by the stream. We are apparently adjacent to the Mara River now. I'm just going to see if we can find an access in. Go and see if we can show you the Mara. It'll be my first time seeing it in a vehicle. I saw it in a plane yesterday quite a few times and saw some pods of hippos, but in a couple months time, 3-4 months, there's going to be millions of animals traversing this river, so I better go dip my toe before that happens. We're going to carry on. It's just another vehicle passing us here. They think, what are we looking at? And it's only a bird, folks. It's only a heron. Not everybody comes out here to look at birds. We do, though. Good afternoon. Just a bird, heron. Yeah. See, they want to see cats, folks. They want to see lions and leopards and cheetah. And when I said it's a heron, he went, okay. Okay, and we're going to continue to see if we can find access to the Mara River. As I said, if a million animals can find it, I'm sure we can. We're going to go over to Ralph, who I believe has got one of my favorite animals.
Thanks, Steve, and yep, they're definitely one of my favorite too. We're just on the edge of the swamp here. I've been skirting around the forest. Now I am going to just get up ahead of them a little bit because they're on the move slightly, but I also just want to turn us into the shade because it is rather warm today and taking a bit of sun here, but here's a perfect spot. Let's turn ourselves into the shade and get a nice view over the swamp and over a herd of elephants. That is wonderful. There we go. A little bit cooler now that I'm sitting in the shade. And look at that. They're also feeling it a little bit. Look at the wafting of the ears quite regularly, getting that radiator working, passing the air over that very fine network of blood that runs through their ears. Now there is a massive amount of a massive amount of blood that passes through those ears, and with them wafting it backwards and forwards, obviously cooling that blood, that would then also be going to the brain. So nice and cool, and even from a very young age they get to keep themselves very cool with their radiator-like ear flaps. Now just in front and on the outside of those ears is where, or ear flaps, is where the ear hole is, as even humans have. It's we have nice big ears that we also use as the sort of place that catches the sound waves and directs it towards the hole, where it is then interpreted and sent to the brain. Very similar with elephants. It's just they've got a double use for those ear flaps, and one in being thermoregulation and also catching the sound waves and sending it into the hole. There's a little youngster keeping up with mommy. moving through the long grass, and you can see how long the grass is when you see those little elephants disappearing inside it. But this group seems quite intent on moving on through. And then in the background you can see some other elephants with the Olololo escarpment right at the back. So you can see where we're sitting now. We are right on the eastern side of the Mara Triangle and looking sort of in a westerly direction. Wonderful. And so I think in a moment we might start up and continue on and see if these lions are still anywhere around. But I'm not overly keen to find them just yet, because I'm pretty sure with this kind of heat, normally they would probably just be lying around as they do, and as lions do best, sleeping during the heat of the day, maybe getting a little bit more active a bit later. But as I say, I think we're going to spend a little bit of time with the elephants, as they're a wonderful animal to watch, especially during the heat of the day. But while we wait and see what happens, let's head you on over to Steve, who's got one of the sprinters of the bush.
Thanks, Ralph. Yeah. We're not talking about biltong this time, Ralph, but wonderful animals. First time I'm going to be talking about them in my life. We have the topi, which are related or are a subspecies of the Sabi, which, as I know it down in the south, is the fastest antelope that we know of, which is fantastic with regards to just endurance running. I mean, look at the size of them. They're quite large antelope, and with the Sabi and the topi, they're very hard to beast-like shape, with the shoulders quite tall and the back sloping. So it's built for endurance running. It's not a sprinter, but when they start running, they keep going. And if you think about hyena have got the very similar sort of shape. Not a fast animal, but they can run all night long, and that's how they hunt. They chase animals to the ground. And we stopped initially because these look like some bulls that were giving each other a little bit of a look, and we were hoping there was some posturing going. We were hoping there was going to be some little display. I believe there's sort of a semi-onset of a rut, some pheromones in the air. Some of the topi have dropped their lambs a couple months ago, and there's some brand new ones that have formed, and it just gives this sort of smell in the air that often confuses these males and gets them into an early rut. But you'll notice in the picture there that they are in sort of an open patch. If you see behind them, there's quite long grass, and in front of them, between us and them, is also some long grass. And Sabi and topi, these animals have a preference for very short new grass. So like the wildebeest, they like new growth that comes up. There's lots of long grass around here that they tend to avoid because it's got lots of cellulose in it and gets quite dry. So they like lawns. So that's why they'll actively keep mowing the lawn here. And whatever they feed on, the rains come and it just sprouts again. Now, what's nice about these animals is they're not destructive grazers. They just crop the grass quite short, but not short enough to cause it any harm, and it just keeps growing back and keep growing back. Wildebeest do quite similar, and it's all part and parcel of this environment. What the wildebeest do that's different is when the males set up their little territory, especially down in the Sabi sands, we see the destruction that they form because they don't leave an area. Up here the males will defend territories in the wildebeest, but as the females move in the migration, the males move with them. So they don't stay for an extended period of time. But down in the Kruger Park, those wildebeest migrations have been cut off. And what we see now is a huge population of wildebeest in one areas. Tom wants to know if topi are faster than cheetahs. And in the sprint, I don't think so, Tom. I don't think an individual cheetah would be able to take down a fully grown topi. As a coalition, they would probably be able to. But if the topi can see them, and where the topi is spending its time and is in these very open areas, so if it can keep away from the cheetah, the cheetah requires getting quite close before it starts that sprint. And if an animal's too fast, it can keep away from the cheetah will tire very quickly. And so the cheetah's only got probably 100 to 200 yards before the speed kind of starts dwindling out of it. Whereas the topi will just keep accelerating and getting away from that animal. So they're very, very fast endurance runners. Not sprinters. They're quite powerful. They can take off quite quickly, but none of them are as fast or as accelerative as your cats. But that's why they like to hang out in herds And also, someone's always looking. Well, someone should be looking. As I say that, all their heads are down, busy feeding. But I'd like to see them. I wouldn't mind putting a cheetah and a topi in a little race next to each other and see how that works. I was reading an article that someone, her name's Kristen, on Twitter gave to me last night. A few people. She sent it through to a few of us, and she's talking about how these animals evade predation from the cheetah. And it's very, very interesting how zebra and impala evade lion and cheetah. And it's a very nice article. I can maybe post it again later if none of you have seen it. But it's interesting how these animals, these antelope, actually hold back quite a huge amount of the acceleration. They only run at sort of a medium pace because that enables them to turn left and right at what to us seems like full speed, but they're not actually running at full speed. If you've ever tried to do this before, I know I've done it. I used to play rugby. You're running at completely full tilt and someone's in front of you to tackle you and you've got to now sidestep him. It's very hard to do so unless you actually slow down quite a bit and run with a deceptive sort of speed. You look like you're running fast. And that's what antelope, zebra and impala tend to do. They look like they're running at full tilt, but as soon as the cheetah, in the case of the impala, or the lion gets close up to the zebra, they do a quick little left or right sidestep, which enables them to sort of try and throw the predator off of their tail. But the lions have got a very good acceleration, a very good turning speed. And I must look at those figures again, because I was only reading it this morning, but very, very interesting how these animals have evolved. You know, the animals are evolving to feed, and the prey animals are evolving to not be eaten. So it is definitely an arms race, and we see it all throughout nature, and there's no better stage for it in the world than the savanna biomes, and then places like here in the Masai Mara. And there we have got, wow, it looks like a black-shouldered kite flying at the back there. I don't know if you can see him flying in the right at the back behind the topi, low down on the ground. I think it was a kite. Beautiful. I think it's actually a pallid harrier. Yes, it is. That is a male pallid harrier. Keeping quite low. Perfect little gliding harrier-like flight over the plains. I've seen one pallid harrier before in my time in South Africa, and I think I saw about 12 this morning. So it is amazing how different habitats lead to different birds, different species. I was chatting a little bit about that on Twitter the other day, about habitat preference and how certain birds or species outcompete others purely because of habitat. And down in South Africa, what I have taken me my entire birding career to see one, I saw 15 or so now in one day. It's quite a different thing. Quite a different thing. Arjun would like to know a very interesting question. This is one that most people who come on safari would like to know. Are we in danger of being attacked by lions while inside the vehicle? And that's very important for people out there to understand that lions don't see this vehicle as food. If the lions are habituated to vehicles, they just learn that this is just a box that follows them around, smells like diesel, and they leave it alone. But there are quite strict guidelines with regards to being in these vehicles. And standing up is one of those things you should not do when you see a lion. And also sticking your legs over the side of the vehicle, because then they suddenly see this two-legged animal that they've evolved with a very long time ago that they're quite fearful of. And if they saw it from 100 meters away, 200 meters away, that's fine. But if you've got a lion, he's sitting right here in front of the car, or should I say right on the side of the car, where he's a bit closer to us, and suddenly someone stands up and projects that human sort of image, that animal, like I spoke about the buffalo before, if you get too close to buffalo and it has to react, that reaction can often be quite negative, purely because it's trying to protect itself, and sometimes the best way to protect itself is to flatten you. I know that sounds quite bad, but if a lion is right here next to the car and it suddenly sees you, its fight and flight reflex is to either get away or attack you. And if you're too close to it, that could happen. I've never heard of a lion jumping on a vehicle to date in the Kruger Park or in the Masai Mara, but it's important for people to pay attention to these guidelines. And climbing out of a vehicle with a lion, not a good idea. I wouldn't do that, and if you do it, you won't do it twice. So no, we are perfectly safe in the car, but we have to respect these animals. They are wild, and we do have to respect them. But on that note, I think we must go find you some lions now. Okay, we're going to carry on our quest for the elusive Masai Mara, or the Mara River, and go back to Ralph, who I believe is still with those big and lovely animals with big ears.
Yes, everyone. Well, I haven't gone anywhere. I've just repositioned slightly because this is probably one of the best places to be in this kind of heat, near to elephants, really enjoying the nice lush grass and also walking where it's very wet underfoot. We can actually hear as they walk how they're splashing through the water there. And this is also one of my favorite places to be in the Mara Triangle. There is only one other place that I really appreciate a little bit more than this. And let's see if the viewers can tell me where is my favorite place in the Mara Triangle. If you've been watching over the last couple of weeks, you would know where I really like to hang out. But so send that through. This is, however, one of the other places that I like coming to, because it is always generally filled with elephants, and there's lots of interaction and lots of action, even in the heat of the day like this. And so it is a very good idea to come down here when it's hot, because we still get to see lots of animals, and they're generally quite active, as opposed to predators at this time of day. With this kind of heat, very relaxed and normally sleeping up in the shade. So I do just like to sit here watching that. And well, it seems Steve was chatting about the safety in a vehicle. Generally speaking, it's very safe in a vehicle, even being near to animals. There have been the odd or rare occasions when animals such as elephants have attacked people in the vehicle, but it's more often than not, if not 100% of the time, down to human error. Mostly either tourists that are not aware of the kind of behavior or the warning signs that big animals like elephants would give them, that would tell them to back off, and they don't obey those rules because they don't understand them, and so they're inside the elephant's space, and eventually the elephant attacks them, maybe pushes the vehicle over and so on. But it is really strange that happens. The other occasions is with guides that are pushing the limits, whether they haven't been trained properly, or they are listening to their guests who are asking them to get closer for better photographic opportunities or whatever. But once again, down to human error, not obeying the warning signs of the animals saying that you're inside their space, back off. You don't obey that, and eventually they have no option but to attack you. So, as I say, if you obey just a couple of small little warning signs from big animals like elephants in a vehicle, there's absolutely no reason for you to be scared whatsoever. Especially if you have an experienced guide with you who knows how to read those kind of signs. Now, Mr. Q-Tip, you want to know if all the elephants or the tailless elephants have disappeared. Mr. Q-Tip, I don't think they have. However, this small group here, they all seem to have their tails. But I'm sure as we skirt around the edge of this swamp, we're going to find a couple of the tailless individuals. And we're still waiting to find out what the mystery will hold as to what has been taking the little youngsters mostly tails off. And there's a great white egret also just hanging around the elephants, hoping for some insects to be bumped up. And you will see them with their wobbly necks when they spot something. And there's a little bit of debate whether it's them actually trying to triangulate where the prey actually is, because, you know, with birds, they've got excellent eyesight. They can see very far, but they can't really judge depth that well. So often you find them bobbing their heads up and down and from side to side, and in such a way triangulating where exactly, in terms of depth, the target is. But the other angle is also that they are doing a little bit of camouflage and moving a bit like grass, like a chameleon does, and just before they strike, as they focus in on the bit of prey. And so, with the great white egret looking for some prey there with his blade-like bill, let's head you on over to Steve, who's got another bird very similar.
Of course I've got a bird, thank you very much, and we are on what I believe is the Mara River, ladies and gentlemen. I am super excited, and we have got ourselves a yellow-billed stork. And that is what it's all about. The flow doesn't seem to be too bad. I think there wasn't too much rain last night, but I would say that when there's big rains, I saw on the footage the other day, this river was flowing very, very fast, and this is where all the animals, one of the places the animals come to cross. Well, there's no crossing happening today. The stork's got a little bit of a gammy knee there. Shame. Look at him. They're probably one of the prettiest of the storks, with that long beak and a beautiful red mask on the face. I'm still amazed that, and Jamie said it this morning, I've been using binoculars for years and I've never had these sort of visuals that we're seeing with the camera. Get right in there on the bird, I always thought I'm looking right at the bird, but the camera just got such a good, and there we go, just even more. Thank you very much, Adrian. And he's going right in on it. Look at that. I don't think I've ever seen a stork like this before. Beautiful, isn't it? Look at that face. There are two of them. There's another one further back there, but this one is very pretty, and we're looking at him. Her, I don't know. They often do form breeding pairs, your storks, and they will be monogamous, mating for life. It generally happens with your larger bird species. And often the nests that these birds will form are platform nests on the top of dead trees, or even on cliffs it might be, somewhere where it's quite safe, but always quite close to water. And in the summer months, these animals are hugely prolific in the open areas, feeding on whatever is in the open area, from crickets, grasshoppers, insects, to even rodents and frogs. And they will not be picky, and they'll even be down here feeding on frogs and fish if they can catch them. I've seen them in the river with their beaks snapping from side to side. The very sensitive beak, so they basically put the beak in the water and it's open, and they move it from side to side, disturbing the sediment. And as soon as something touches that beak, they just snap it shut like a bear trap, and whatever it is that got inside or touched the beak is then, as we would say, toast. Oh, what is he doing? He looks like he's actually busy sunning his feathers. A good way of cleaning any parasites or bacteria in there. For those of you who don't get to clean your stuff very often, leaving it hanging in the sun is always a good means of taking out any of the bacteria or any of the funny stuff you don't want anymore. It's possible telling by looking at the head. He probably had a little bit of a bath. Very important for these birds to have their ablutions. Generally every day birds will try and clean themselves, whether it be just with the preen oil and the preening, or it'll actually physically be a little bit of a bath. Just enjoying a bit of quiet time by the river until this big noisy Land Rover came along and disturbed them. Dale asks, are there any leeches in the water? I've never encountered a leech in South Africa that I know of. So I'm not sure if in this river there'll be leeches, but as far as I'm aware, what I've heard, leeches are generally in dams, slow moving water, where this is a moving water. I stand to be corrected there. I'm not the leech expert, but what I do know about leeches is they're very good for purifying your blood and for taking out any poisons or toxins, and they're being used in all sorts of cosmetic industry now for doing that. Also as a form of sort of liposuction and removal of all sorts of inequalities in the human body. They are very, very useful for that. And another way we are using nature to improve ourselves. But no, if anyone else knows anything about where we find leeches, I think they're in more stagnant, not moving water. If I am not correct, I apologize. But it is a marvellous day by the Mara River. I can't believe we're down here. The only vehicle. Miles. There's a couple in the distance there. But it's something quite special listening to. I'm not sure if you can pick it up on the ambient there, but just listening to the movement of the water. Let's see. tranquility of water is often a very important thing behind the improvement of people's daily lives, and just listening to the movement of water is very soothing, very, very soothing. It's a very good meditation in its own, and I think these storks are meditating. They are one with themselves. So we are on the Mara, so I'm pretty sure we'll see a hippo or two shortly. And I have spotted some crocodiles in the distance, but we are going to be leaving the Mara for now and heading all the way down to sunny and warm South Africa, where a few of my friends are starting their afternoon drive. And I believe Mr. Scotty Dyson is already on drive and is ready to say good afternoon.
Drive in the Masai Mara. He must be very, very excited. My name's Scott and I'm teamed up with Davy on camera. As you can see, we've got lucky and managed to relocate a portion of the Nkuhuma Pride of Lion. Tristan did find them in the same spot this morning, and well done to him for finding them, because it's a very, very thick and tricky spot. So he did a great job this morning. And it's not the entire pride. We've noticed that over at least the last week or so that we've been seeing them quite a bit again, is that there's 3 lioness that are spending time away from the rest of the pride, and here it's built up of 2 adults, 6 sub-adults, and 1 tiny youngster. So 9 lions in total, all snoozing here. And I did go out last night with some of the staff after dinner, and we did manage to find actually both different sets of the pride. They were quite far from one another, but interestingly this portion definitely looked a bit hungrier than they do now, so I'm guessing they may have had a small snack during the night. I wonder what they would have caught, but their bellies do seem like they've at least got something in it. Late last night they were looking very, very hungry when we found them at the Buffelshoek waterhole. There's a good example over there. And most of the individuals that we've been looking at now are the youngsters, the sub-adults, of which there are 6 of them. I think it's just 1 boy and 5 girls. And for me it's just so incredible to see how much bigger this pride is compared to when I last left here. It's definitely going to be a force to be reckoned with once all these 5 young ladies come of age and also start having their own cubs. So exciting prospects for the future. And very soon we could have a mega pride waltzing around Djuma. Mary, you wondering or not the lions down here in Djuma may be slightly darker than the ones up in the Mara? I don't think so, but what you may find is that the kind of all the different colors and contrasts and textures of the Mara creates a kind of different canvas on which we see the lions, and that may make them look a little bit more pale than the ones here, but I certainly haven't noticed the ones here being any darker. But I mean, you have a finer attention to detail than I do, and maybe that's just the problem. Maybe I just haven't been paying enough attention, but I haven't really noticed major differences in color in general between lions. Let's take a look. That little cupboard right at the back there, Darby's actually not easy to see from where we are, but some of Mom's milk. And I really hope that this cub's health takes a turn for the better. It has condition, and it's got a little bit of a cough at the moment, or at least the last few days that we've been seeing it. But if the pride continues to be successful, making lots of kills, then it'll definitely improve the chances of this cub getting rid of its illnesses. We're not entirely sure what could be wrong with it. It could have feline TB. A lot of the lions in the Kruger National Park do have this. Wonderful stuff. Well, we're going to stay put with this pride in the hope that they may get up and take us for a walk, or who knows, maybe something will stumble into them in this very thick area that they're in, so they could get lucky with a meal coming to them. In the meantime, though, we're going to stay put and send you across to Noelle to let you know what her plans are for the afternoon.
Afternoon, everyone. We have a very lovely overcast and cloudy day, which is keeping everything nice and cool. I am Noelle, and on camera, I would like to welcome back Pilot Fergus. Hello, Pilot Fergus. He's saluting. Actually, we're in a car, so you're supposed to salute like this. And amazingly, we have Giraffe. Oh, and then of course they've run away. They're over there now. I got so excited we'd framed up this beautiful shot, and then of course they move, but we have Giraffe. We don't get to see a lot of giraffe here. They move around, and we have a little journey. I've counted 3 or 4 already, but we've just got to this one that we can see nicely here. So this is the southern giraffe, different. There's the big one that we had framed up, and then she decided to meander off. Different from the giraffe you'll see up there in the Mara. There's Maasai giraffe up there. And we have a couple of youngsters and this big beautiful female, and then there was another female that's probably lurking around the corner. So we have a journey or a tower or a kaleidoscope of giraffe, whichever collective noun you prefer. Now, something I love about giraffe very much is their long, long, long eyelashes, and also their long tongues, which you just saw her poking hers out there. Their tongue is probably over 20 centimeters was one I heard, and then up to 40 centimeters is another one that I've read. And it's a sort of bluish black color. I've always been told it's so that it doesn't get sunburned. And then those long eyelashes are to help keep things away from their eyes when they're busy feeding. I think I maybe just want to pull up a little bit so we can watch our journey progress on. And we're also going to be able to see these beautiful storm clouds that we have forming in the back. So someone's getting rain. It's not us, but I do hope that it will be us at some point today. I believe there's rain forecasted for the whole week, and I'm hoping we get 300 mils. That will be my hope. Tom, really good question. Could those lions, the Nkuhumas that are over there with Scotty D, hunt these giraffe? Most definitely, Tom. They would love a big meal like giraffe, and those females would be very capable of taking down a giraffe of these sizes. Now that female that's there on the right hand side, she sort of walked into this tree, and that's helping itch in spots that she can't reach. Also helps take some ticks off. Beautiful there. Oh, and we've got a lovely oxpecker on her neck, also helping to take ticks off. As many of you know, but many of you may not know, oxpeckers' main diet is blood, and so they land on prey species, so giraffe, impala, rhino, buffalo, zebra, and they take those ticks off. But if there's a wound that's on that animal, they'll also keep the wound open to keep the blood flowing. Now, I'm really loving that slate gray sky and the colors of this giraffe in the background. It's making me happy, and the green foliage mixed in. Now, every giraffe, every subspecies of giraffe has a unique coat pattern, and then every individual within the species has an individual pattern, like a fingerprint. So the females and the young will live in a herd, and then the males will sometimes be in little bachelor groups, little loose associative herds, and sometimes on their own. Very similar to many other herd species. So for elephants, for instance, you'll get females all together, and then the males will sometimes, the adult males will sometimes be on their own, and then sometimes in little groups. Now, the females are also known to be in what's known as a loose associative herd, meaning they're not always very close together like you see now. Sometimes they're very spread out. So if you see one female, there's probably more that you just that are not in the immediate vicinity, but probably within 100 meters of each other. And their communications are on frequencies that we can't necessarily hear. So their distress call is a sound. It's very light. And then if they're being eaten by something like the Nkuhumas, they do make a sort of throttling noise when that happens. But the rest of the communications are on a very low frequency. So for a very long time, the assumption was that giraffes were mute. They are in fact not mute. It's just something that our ears do not register and pick up. I would be interested to know if elephants can register giraffe communications, because elephants have much more sensitive vocal abilities and are very receptive to things like the thunder and lightning that's probably happening on the back end of that storm. Elephants here can recognize that, can feel that, can hear that. A very good question. While we're looking at that beautiful landscape, I'm going to see if in my book I have any examples to show you. But basically, the Maasai giraffe, the pattern looks like a Canadian maple leaf, like on the Canadian flag. And for ours, we have more of this block. Look, there's other species that you'll find up in that area. You get reticulated giraffe, but the main giraffe species is Maasai giraffe. And okay, I can show you a thorny croft, which they've actually regulated as not a subspecies anymore. They've recently done a lot of DNA testing that's changed how many subspecies are around and how many species are around. But here's our southern giraffe. Okay. Now notice that the pattern comes most of the way down the legs, and that it's these sort of blocks, but they're blotchy blocks. It's not like a reticulated giraffe that are very, very square, sort of abstract blocks, as you will. And then the thorny croft over here, the pattern stops this way. They're shorter, and the pattern is even more mixed media inside of there. And then if you can, Ferg, I don't know if you can zoom in on this little one that's at the tip of my fingertip there. Oh, sorry for my hat. That's almost like the maple leaf you'd see on Maasai giraffe. So when I started guiding, they said that there was one species of giraffe and 9 subspecies. Now they're saying that there's 3 species of giraffe and 6 subspecies. And then they're still doing a little bit of more research on that. Now I'm not going to head up. I'm actually going to stay here on Djuma, but I'm going to send you all up back to the Masai Mara, to Steve. And Steve-O, I hope you're having an amazing time up there in Kenya. We miss you. Give Ralph a hug for me, and Taylor and Jamie and everybody, and say hi to Megs and Faith and everybody that's up that side. And then I hope you have something interesting to show everybody whilst you're up there.
Thanks, Noel. I miss you guys too. And when I got here, I gave everybody a hug anyway. So I think there's already a close-knit sort of team going. But when I get back, I'll be sure to give them all a hug again. And what we do have here, what is a trip to the Mara River, folks, without spotting a hippopotamus? We have a pod of them here in the river, and we just missed the one doing its ablutions as it was defecating. It is just off to the right there by the rocks. It might pop up again, but it's a very important ecological sort of thing in the rivers here. There he goes. There's the ears at the back there. Is the hippo, because they feed on grass. They take that grass material and they bring most of it back down to the river, and a lot of it gets defecated in the river. And now what that does is it produces, it's grass, so it's very similar, digested to that of the rhino as well as the elephant, apart from the fact the elephant has bark and twigs and stuff in it. But that grass material, which is semi-digested, it's fermenting, gets deposited into the little dam here, or the river should I say, and that is a huge proponent of the diet for the fish. So lots of vegetarian fish. I'm not getting my words right now at the Mara River, but there's lots of fish that eat vegetation and eat all sorts of materials in the river, from algae to plant material to hippo dung. And so then that provides food for your herons, for the fish eagles, for the crocodile, and mainly what most of the food crocodiles feed on here is in fact fish. We don't have zebra and wildebeest crossing by the 1,000 every day. They only are crossing at a certain time of the year, and it is not their prime source of food, but they feed on fish. And most places else in the country where we find crocodile, they don't feed on too much meat, but mainly fish. And having hippos in the pool provides the organic material which feeds the fish, which then feeds a huge amount of trophic animals above them. So very, very important. And if any of you have ever been to the Okavango Delta or have seen the Okavango Delta, the entire delta itself is managed and kept open by hippo movement. They make these very big pathways through, and they keep the stream moving. They keep the sediment from depositing anywhere, and that allows movement of water, and that allows the delta to perpetuate. And I reckon a place like the delta is what it is because of animals like hippo. And what is this hippo doing? He's moving with some intention towards the left, and I'm not sure if it was a male or if he's just moving. There was another hippo in front of him there, or her. I was wondering if he was moving across to do a little bit of argy-bargy, which often happens in pods of hippo. They do sort of assign themselves a little territory. There's the other one. do assign themselves some territory, and you don't see hippos doing too much. And when they are doing something, it's got something to do with territory or reproduction or feeding. Other than that, they're pretty docile individuals. Okay, the one on the left looks like a female. Oh, there we go. That's what I was talking about. You see with the tail, it's busy defecating there. And that's the vegetation that's splattering around in the river. Take Care asks a question, do hippos use infrasound? I don't think so. I mean, I think the only animals that use infrasound are elephants. Bats use a form of sonar, or echolocation. Dolphins use sonar, but I don't think hippos have the ability. I mean, the reason why they have been put in the family of whales now is because they communicate underwater. They're able to anyway, but that's through those loud grunts and stuff. I don't think there's any sort of low-key frequency that hippos are communicating with, but I could be wrong, but I've never heard of anything like that before. And they definitely have very loud grunts and snorts that they do, and they do spend most of their time in water. And as I said, same family as hippos, as whales. They give birth in water, they mate in water, they suckle in the water, they communicate in water, and they spend most of their time in water. So why not call them a whale? And they're also vegetarian, of course. There's definitely something going on between these two. I wonder if that one at the back is actually a young male. Or if maybe these are two territorial bulls that have small little claims to this pond with very invisible lines that we are unaware of. It's often the case. The territorial boundaries are things we cannot perceive. Have a lot to do with smell, and maybe some, in the case here, of some fecal content in the... Here we go. Doesn't look like a very big hippo by those teeth. It might just be some youngsters. Definitely the one on the left doesn't look very big. Okay, so we're here with this dangerous animal that is responsible for many human deaths in the world. And we're going to be going down to South Africa to a good friend of mine who has got another very dangerous animal. Not that dangerous, but rather dangerous.
So, sounds like you're having a good time at the Mara River with Steve and the hippos. We've just been sitting here patiently kind of planning our attack for the afternoon, and we think it's probably in our best interest to head off for about 45 minutes to an hour or so. These guys are all looking quite comatose for the time being, so we'll probably do a bit of snooping about, see if we can't find any sign of Tundi, a leopardess, and a young cub. We're all desperately trying to work out where they are, so I'll do a kind of loop around the general area and see if we can't find any sign, and come back here a little bit later once these guys seem to wake up. We'll hopefully wake up a little bit later on. Like I said, I'm fairly convinced that they did catch something last night, and I was surprised that they were found in this area, because from where we saw them at Buffelshoek Waterhole last night, it's about, a kilometer, half a mile from there to here, and I would have been surprised that they've moved such a short distance, considering they were all quite hungry when we saw them. So I think they had a small snack, maybe an Inyala or an Impala, something, that would have got at least something into all of their bellies. There's of course quite a few lions here, that's why it's not too easy to notice that they've had a snack, but I'm confident they have. So seeing as though they're not absolutely starving, I don't think they're going to get up anytime soon. Cool afternoon. It's by far the coolest afternoon we've had in quite some time, and I'm hoping this cool weather brings us a little bit of rain later on. We are desperate for some rain. Kathy, you'd like to know if these youngsters are doing any hunting with the adults yet? Not that I'm aware of. They could well be getting to that kind of stage of their lives where they could contribute to the hunts, but I'm guessing they're not kind of fully involved for the time being. They could probably lurk in the outskirts in the background and contribute if and when some of the fleeing animals run into them, and that's very often the case with lions, because there are multiple members in the pride. When they ambush their prey, they can sometimes get lucky and send members. And I remember sitting with a pride of lion. It was a very similar setup to actually exactly what we were experiencing here. They were lying up in very thick bush. There was a similar amount of lions, and it was also just a couple of adult lioness and quite a few youngsters, just like we're seeing here. Although those youngsters were considerably younger than these guys. They were probably only a year old. These guys, I'm guessing, are closer to 2 years of age now. I'm not actually sure how old they are, so if any of you could help us with that info, I'd really appreciate that. And what happened was the lioness got up and started stalking. We weren't sure what, because it was very thick vegetation like this, and we heard the ambush kind of take place, and we heard hooves and bushes breaking, and all of a sudden an impala ran straight into all the 1-year-old cubs, and they instinctively latched onto this impala and could subdue it for long enough for the adults to return and dispatch it. So I guess that's an example of how even young cubs may not have the skills required, but could sometimes have some luck with helping the pride doing some hunting. We sadly I'm not too sure. Haven't been lucky enough to see them hunting. Mr. Q-Tip, you'd like to know how many lions are in this pride? Well, in this portion of the pride that we're looking at now, there's one tiny youngster whose ear we can see twitching over there. I think it's nursing. Oh no, it's not, it's just sleeping. So that's the smallest one, and then it's got 6 slightly older cousins, which comprise of, I think it's 5 young girls and 1 young boy, and then 2 adult lioness. So there's 9 in total here, but there are another 3 adult lioness that are fragmented from the pride that we saw not too far from here actually last night, but we're not too sure where they ended up in the early hours of this morning. So in total there are 12 lions in the Nkuhuma pride, but only of which 4 are adults. Sorry, 5 are adults. My abacus is a bit rusty, clearly. I'm still astounded at how Tristan found these guys in here this morning. He did an incredibly good job, and well done to him for pulling that off, because it really is a tricky area. Wonderful stuff. Well, it's not just lions down here in the Sabi sands of South Africa. It sounds like Jamie has got lucky up in the Mara.
Lions in the Sabi sands, lions in the Mara. And what else are Sundays for but for relaxing, lying back, and catnapping? And in this particular case, catnapping on a very freshly dug pile of dirt. That is not why I am late this afternoon. I am late this afternoon because I had many problems. And that is not a personal confession. I literally had many problems to do with vehicles and broadcasting. But we're back up, we're out and about, and we are with the Olololo Pride. All 14 of them that I've been able to count now, but that doesn't mean that they're not all present and accounted for. Just a quick introduction for those of you that have perhaps just discovered this live stream. My name is Jamie, and this afternoon Manu is on camera with me for the first time in ages, Manu. It has been a while. Now don't forget, because this is a live safari, hashtag Safari Live is how you can get hold of us to ask your burning questions on lions and other creatures of the African wilderness and other aspects of the African wilderness. Now, I'm waiting patiently because every time that I have come to this spot, the Olololos have just been lying, doing nothing. But then every time that Wolf has come to this spot, he has had them climbing trees and doing acrobatics and hula hooping and balancing balls on their noses. I'm hoping that as it gets a little bit cooler, that's what they have in store for us this afternoon. And just in case you're wondering about the freshly dug dirt, let me just mention it now. This is what's known as a borrow pit. So you'll see that there's lots and lots of places where the earth has clearly been excavated. Lions don't have a feel necessarily for posing or picking the most picturesque place to be. They go where it's comfortable, and this is very comfortable for them. But it has been artificially dug. It is what's known as a borrow pit for the roads. So for the repair and maintenance of the roads, dirt gets dug up. and that's where the Olololos have decided to settle. And you can imagine the dirt's still nice and damp. So on a hot Sunday afternoon when the sun is blazing down, actually probably really comfortable for them. It's all soft, it's not compact on other places like it is in other places. And it's a really good snuggle position. It's all loose and comfy and nice and cool. And you will notice at some point or another that there are other vehicles in the sighting. The Olololos are an extremely popular lion pride. They have been so reliable over the last few days. This morning, when we caught up with them on the sunrise safari briefly, they were being chased by the resident herd of what we term Dugger boys, old buffalo bulls, and one random buffalo cow actually. And they were chasing the lions round. Now there was no real threat to the lions. The cubs are now all large enough to be able to escape and fend for themselves and have a little bit of common sense. So they immediately sort of snuck away and went to lie in the shade, just far enough that the buffalo couldn't do anything about it, just to taunt them and keep them on edge a little bit. Mary, you say that those lions look exactly how you feel. They look exactly how I feel as well, Mary, after our series of complications this afternoon. That sense of relief that all is now working well, that's how I'm feeling. Almost to the point, if they weren't actually wild lions, that I'd be tempted to go and join them. And lovely to hear Scarlett's name again. Now, Scarlett's wondering about a question that we answered recently, actually, and something that we've discussed, and it might be worthwhile getting the other guides' opinions as well. Now, Scarlett's wondering what the largest lion pride is that we've ever seen. Now, I've never seen the famous super pride that lived around the Lubombo Mountains in the Kruger Park. Apparently at one point they were over 40 members strong, but very seldom seen all together. The largest pride that I've seen has been over 20. I never managed to successfully do a head count, but around about 20-25 lions. Possibly there have been times in my life where I've seen even more lions, but I can't think of any at the time. I mean, 17 lions is quite a large pride. It's a relatively large pride. 13 of them are cubs, so there's no guarantees until they reach their first year, at which point their chances of survival increase dramatically. And these cubs still have a long way to go. They're definitely out of the most risky time of their lives, though. They're no longer small and delicate and hiding away all the time, and their mothers don't have to leave them hidden in potentially dangerous places. They don't look as though they're feeling under threat at all. They couldn't look more comfortable if they tried. Now, I have to tell you that this morning, Steve was in his absolute element when it came to the birds that we were seeing on his first drive out in the Mara. It sounds like he is continuing his birding streak.
And we are back with some beautiful birds. One of them is a sandpiper. I'm not sure which one. I apologize for leaving my app at home today. And the other one is a snipe. But folks, look how beautiful they are in contrast. But what I really want to look at is look at the feeding depth that the snipe is able to achieve with that beak. Look how far into the mud it can probe. Oh, look at that. A little bit of a dance. A bit of the wag of the tail. Look how much further it can dig its beak into the mud than the sandpiper can do. I think it's a green sandpiper, but I'm not sure. Something spooked them. Very, very beautiful. It's nice to be able to see them in the open like this. And what I love about birds and their beaks is the different feeding that they have. And whenever you look at a bird, you can often find 5, 10, 15 different types of species in and around an area, and they are not competing because of either the length of their legs or the length of their beak or the shape of the beak. So it enables them to compete for different food. As soon as birds are too similar, they outcompete each other and displace each other. It's not often you find animals that will compete without displacing, and that's why you find large predators, medium-sized predators. You don't find 2 species of lion anymore. You only find one, because the niche would only fit for one of that type. So that's what happens in birds. Whenever you see the length, the beak, it's very interesting. Yes, naturable, the snipe has got beautiful coloring, and I believe that's a painted snipe. And what's interesting about it is that when we look in the bird kingdom, normally in the bird kingdom, what do we see? We see that that is the sandpiper. If we just go to the other one, please, Adrian. There we go. It's just forward, middle of your screen. I think that is the male. It's not very pretty, but the female is very attractive, because the female is actually a little bit of a what would you say? She likes to go out and look pretty and have all the men. So obviously the males like to choose the female when it comes to snipes, and she has more than one mate, and she will not look after her chicks. She's very naughty like that. He will do all of the work. So it's lovely to see beautiful birds like this, and there's not many in the bird kingdom where the female is more attractive than the male, but when it comes to snipes, that is the way they roll. But I just love how they are competing at very similar areas on the mud flats there for any sort of insect in the mud, and the longer beak, you can see the sandpiper on the left is just picking whatever it can off the surface. It's not really allowing it too much feeding depth. But then the legs are a bit longer, so it can probably wade more than the snipe could do. The snipe has given up doing his activity. They call it needling. I'm going to stick that beak in quite deep. You see it with hoopoes, the ground hoopoes. They walk around, the normal common hoopoo. They're jabbing their beak in, looking for any form of insect on the floor. Obviously the snipe's beak is very straight, and we're watching it go right up to its nasal passages there, so right up to the end of the beak in the mud, and that is a really nice depth, and also enables him to preen a little bit easier. As you can see, the long beak like that helps you to scratch further back. We just had some birds fly by in the picture. I don't know if you saw that, but the snipe got a bit of a fright. You know, this is for me the first time I've seen a snipe just out in the open, just sort of hanging around. Normally they're sort of concealed in sort of quite bushy undergrowth on the side of the dam or river. They don't often spend too much time just out in the open, so it's nice to be able to see them doing that. Very, very special. And if we pan to the left, something that is what we first saw, you can see that wonderful tail over there. A little pan of water on the side of this river. We have got a Nile crocodile, ladies and gentlemen, that is just taking life extremely easy. Initially thought it was a piece of a crocodile, but if you pan left, you will see that the rest of the body is kind of submerged, with just the head and the nose sticking out, and that is actually a really big crocodile. It's very hard to see because he's quite submerged.